The renal system is a system made to filter blood and take out all unwanted materials, and it is made of 2 kidneys present in the posterior abdominal wall, 2 ureters, 1 urinary bladder, and 1 urethra. For the last time, because this is the last lecture in this summer course, which was very short and has been under special circumstances, and for the last time, questions and answers. This is the theme of what we should do, and questions and answers open the door for increasing your knowledge, for feeding your intelligence, and making you a wise person. What is this horizontal line? It is telling us that this line is at the upper pole of the left kidney, and it is showing that the right kidney is at a lower level than the left. This is the left kidney, and this is the right kidney, and the right kidney is slightly lower than the left because of the position of the liver. Then we have the 2 ureters, right and left, in the posterior abdominal wall, and then they do what? They enter the pelvis and join the single urinary bladder, and the bladder will empty its contents through the urethra. This is a mind map showing what we are required to know about the kidneys. Now, this mind map is containing only the summary of the very basic information put in an arranged fashion on shelves so that the information will be very well arranged, and you can follow each idea on its own. The mind map is talking about an overview of the kidney, coverings of the kidney, what is the external anatomy of the kidney, what is the internal anatomy, and what makes the kidney, the components. Then it addresses the blood supply and the nerve supply and the lymphatics. You can choose from this map whatever subject you want to discuss. For example, an overview. What is the shape of the kidney? It is bean shape. What is the color of the kidney? It is red-brown, and it has an upper pole, lower pole, and lateral surface and medial surface. The medial surface has an indentation called renal sinus, and it is the place of the hilum, and the hilum means what? Means the place where arteries, veins, nerves go in and out of an organ. What is this section? This is a transverse section in the region of the abdomen, and this is the midline, and you can see that this is the cross section of the kidney, where you can see that there is fat around the kidney. And if we look into the cross section of the kidney, you can see an outer light red area. This is the cortex. On the inside you see triangles of deep red color areas. These are parts of the medulla, and when you go towards the midline, you can see that blood vessels are getting in and out of the kidney. This is called the hilum of the kidney, and the depression is called renal sinus, and the left kidney is medial to the spleen. When you go to the right side, you see the same image, but the cross section is smaller because this is higher up in the right kidney, while on the left it was nearly in the middle, because the right kidney is lower than the left, and the right kidney is medial to the liver, and it makes an impression on the inferior surface of the liver. Let us extract information out of this closer view of the cross section of the abdominal region, and this is where we see what we see: the kidney, outer layer, that's the cortex. On the inner layer we see parts of the medulla. Then we see the renal capsule immediately on the kidney, and if we look at the tip of this arrow, we can see fat, and this is called Peri Renal Fat. It's made of adipose tissue, and on the outside of the fat we can see a fascia, and this is the renal fascia. What structures are inside this yellow circle? It's containing artery and a vein. These are the two components of the blood supply of the kidney. Blood supply of the kidney is very important because the kidney is made to purify blood. What is this arrow telling me? It is telling me that the kidney is lateral to this muscle. This muscle is the psoas major, and the kidney is anterior to the quadratus lumborum. What is this structure? This is the fatty layer around the kidney on the outside, and this is the perirenal fat. And then outside to the perirenal fat we have the renal fascia, which is also called Ureter's fascia, and the structure sitting on the upper pole of the kidney is an endocrine gland called Adrenal Gland, and a better description is the suprarenal gland, the gland that is superior to the kidney. And this structure is the peritoneum. It is the parietal peritoneum, where this parietal peritoneum fixes the kidney to the posterior abdominal wall. What information can I extract from this image? First of all, of course, the right kidney is lower than the left. I can see that the color of the kidney is reddish brown, and there is segmentation. The anterior surface is not smooth, it has segmentation, and this is a normal finding in a human kidney. It is also found in animals. And the lower pole of the left kidney is higher than the lower pole of the right. And let's see what is next. We can see here the segmentation of the external appearance of the kidney, and there's a depression on the medial side called renal sinus, and in this renal sinus things go in and out of the kidney, which is called the hilum of the kidney. The liver has a hilum, and the lung has a hilum as well. When we look to this artery, it is the renal artery. It is the only artery that comes at right angle out of the abdominal aorta. And the renal vein. The renal vein drains the blood from the kidney, and it joins the inferior vena cava in the posterior abdominal wall. Now the inferior vena cava is to the right of the aorta. Therefore, the right renal vein is shorter than the left renal vein. And what comes out of the kidney is the waste material that the body does not need, and these end results will be collected by a system called the drainage system, which starts inside the kidney, and then the different structures will collect into a larger cavity called the renal pelvis, and renal pelvis will narrow a little bit and comes down as ureter. The renal artery is a very important artery. As it comes and enters the kidney, it divides into segmental arteries. These segmental arteries will start to branch into interlobar arteries, and these interlobar arteries are going to divide into lobular arteries, and then we have the arcuate arteries, which are going to supply the cortex of the kidney. What is this view? This is a section of the kidney showing the internal structures found inside the kidney. Start with the outer lighter red color area, and this is the renal cortex. This is the outer layer of the kidney, which contains the functional unit of the kidney. Then we can see triangular structures, several of them. They are in the form of pyramids, and these structures, the pyramids, form what is called the renal medulla, and is the inner layer of the kidney. Then we have extensions of the cortex between the pyramids, and these extensions are called renal columns, and they are cortex. They are real cortex, but sometimes they are called cortex-like tissue, and they lie between the pyramids. Renal columns are cortex tissues between the pyramids of the medulla. Now, the pyramid of the medulla is going to get narrower near the apex, and this is called renal papilla, where everything that is filtered is going to be poured into the beginning of the drainage system of urine. And this beginning of the drainage system of the urine is called a minor calyx. And here is a minor calyx where the papilla of the pyramid opens into this wine glass-like structure. This is the beginning of the draining system, and several minor calyces will collect into a major calyx. This is the arrow is pointing at a major calyx. Here are two sections of two kidneys, and on your left you can see that the renal medullary pyramids, they open into a minor calyx, and this is another minor calyx, and these are minor calyces. How do I know that this is a minor calyx? Because it is related to the tip of the pyramid of the medulla, and this tip is called the papilla. Now, when you go to the right image, you will find that if there's a stone blocking the beginning of the ureter, then the whole system is going to dilate. At this point, we know what is the cortex, and we know what is the renal column, and we know what is the medulla. Now we reach a stage where we can easily demarcate what is called the renal lobe, and this is half of the renal column, then the cortex, and half of the other side of the renal column, and this is what is making the renal lobe. the functional unit of the kidney is the nephron. The nephron is made of different two parts. First of all, vascular part and then collecting part. The vascular part starts with what? It starts with an arteriole coming to the nephron. This is called the Efferent Arteriole, starting with an A. And what is this arteriole going to do? It is going to branch into capillaries. What type of capillaries? Arterial capillaries. And this tuft of capillaries is called the glomerulus. These arterial capillaries will not change to venous capillaries as in other capillary beds. They stay as arterial capillaries, and they are drained or coming out of this glomerulus also as an arteriole, and this arteriole is called Efferent Arteriole, starting with an E, while the coming one is afferent, starting with A. Then filtration will take place in the glomerulus. Now we have the starting system of the collecting ducts, and the starting point is a structure that has a cavity, and this is called the renal capsule. This cavity is lined by simple squamous epithelium, and it is also called Bowman's capsule. What happens next is that the glomerulus is going to invaginate into the renal capsule, just like when the heart invaginates the pericardium and the lungs invaginate into the pleural cavity. The glomerulus is going to invaginate the renal capsule, and then when it gets into the invagination into the renal capsule, it becomes renal corpuscle. Renal corpuscle is made of two components, the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. Now, many people and reference call this structure a glomerulus. It is scientifically called renal corpuscle. What is this structure? It is the renal corpuscle. The outer layer of Bowman's capsule is made of simple squamous epithelium. This is called the parietal layer. Then, as it reaches the point of entry of the afferent arteriole, the point of reflection, it changes from parietal layer to visceral layer. The visceral layer is going to cover what? It covers the capillaries, covers the glomerulus. And is it going to stay as simple squamous epithelium? The answer is no. It is going to change to a new type of cell called podocyte. That means there's a cell body, and the cell body will send primary central process, and this central process is going to send side branches, and these side branches are going to embrace or to cover the capillaries. And at the tip of this arrow you can see that there is a central process and branching from the central process to cover capillaries, and this is the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. The question is, are cells making the Bowman's capsule the same as in parietal and visceral? The answer is no. They are going to change in nature. The parietal is simple squamous and the visceral is podocyte cells. And between the visceral and the parietal there is a space. This space is called the renal space, and this space is just like the pleural space or the pericardial space. This space is going to contain fluid what is filtered out of the glomerulus, and then this fluid is drained out of the renal space to a set of tubules, the beginning of which is called the proximal convoluted tubules. What did we learn from the previous slide? We learned that the renal corpuscle structure. Now, physiologically, there was the process of filtration. Now we want to collect this end product of the filtration and carrying it through a system of tubules. Some tubules will absorb something and other tubules will secrete something, and the end result is destined to go out of the body. Inside this circle is the renal corpuscle, and the pink part is Bowman's capsule, and we can see the afferent and the efferent arterioles are coming in and out. By the way, the afferent and the efferent, they are arterioles, but there's a question here. Are these two arterioles of the same size? The answer is no. The coming arteriole, the afferent one, is larger than the efferent, the coming out. So pressure will build inside the glomerulus. So inside this circle we have Bowman's capsule, and Bowman's capsule drains into a system of tubules called proximal convoluted tubules. Proximal to what? To the renal corpuscle, and convoluted means that it is tortuous and it is tubules. Then the proximal convoluted tubules will lose their convolutions and come down as a straight tubule that has a thick part and a thin part, and this tubule is going to dip down into the medulla and comes out and becomes thicker again, and this is called the loop of Henle. What is the loop of Henle made of? It is made of a descending loop into the medullary pyramid and a point of turning and an ascending part of the loop of Henle, also made of thin and thick parts. They are lined with simple squamous epithelium, and the ascending limb is going to end up into another set of tubules, the third set, and this is called distal convoluted tubules. Why distal? Because they are away from the renal corpuscle, and convoluted because they are tortuous, and tubules. Now, we have two sets of convoluted tubules. The proximal one is more convoluted than the distal one. At the distal convoluted tubule, all events are finished. No excretion of anything and no absorption of anything. And this distal convoluted tubule is going to end up in a collecting duct. This collecting duct is going to collect the excreted product from different glomeruli, and they are going to end up in the medulla. This is another nephron joining the collecting duct, and this is the collecting duct, and let's see what is next. What are we going to collect from this image? First of all, that the parietal layer of Bowman's capsule is simple squamous, and then between the parietal and the visceral there's a space called renal space, and we can see the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule covering the capillaries, and this layer, the visceral layer, is made of podocytes, cells with processes, and the renal space, when it collects all the filtered fluid, it is going to be connected to the proximal convoluted tubule. This is a real histological section of the cortex of the kidney, and we can see that there is a rounded or oval structure, and this is the renal corpuscle, and the tip of the arrow is pointing at the parietal layer of Bowman's capsule, which is a simple squamous epithelium. What is this? This is the renal corpuscle. What is this space? This is renal space. Between what? Between the parietal and visceral layers of the Bowman's capsule. And what is this middle structure that contains many nuclei? This is the tuft of capillaries covered by the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule, and this is what is called the glomerulus. Next, and to your left, we can see in this oval shape a cross-section of a tubule. This is the proximal convoluted tubule. You can see that it is an oblique section here, and the lining epithelium is simple cuboidal. Sometimes they become high cuboidal, nearly columnar. And inside this circle, we can see a cross-section of a tubule which is different from the proximal convoluted tubule. This is the distal convoluted tubule, and you can see that it is also lined with a simple cuboidal, but the lumen is narrower. The question from the previous slide is, we have proximal convoluted tubules and distal convoluted tubules. Are they of the same overall structure? The answer is no. They have slight differences in the lumen and in the lining cells. Coming back to this slide, which is showing the simple capillary of a glomerulus. This cell covering the capillary is called a podocyte. This is the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule, and we can see it is sending a central process called the primary process, and this primary process is sending side processes called secondary processes, and this same cell is going to send another central process which is also giving secondary process, and we can see there is interdigitations of secondary processes, and there's a space between the secondary processes. This space has a special name called filtration slits. These are the places where the fluid comes out of the capillaries. We looked at the outer part of the capillaries made by the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. Now let's have a look at the capillary type in the glomerulus. It is the fenestrated type of capillaries. The endothelium has several holes in them, so that these holes allow fluids and waste products, but they don't allow cells to come out. And of course, each endothelial or epithelial cell has a basement membrane. Now we know that in the kidney we have cortex and medulla, And now we know that the functional unit of the kidney is a nephron, and we know the parts of the nephron, and there is a question here. Can we find renal corpuscles in the cortex? The answer is yes, of course. This is their home. The next question is, what happens to the loop of Henle? Does it stay in the cortex? The answer is no. It has to dip down into the medulla. What other structures are present in the medulla? They are the collecting ducts. So, can we find a glomerulus or a renal corpuscle in the medulla? The answer is never. Then, in the cortex, are all renal corpuscles at the same level? The answer is no. There are renal corpuscles near the outer part of the cortex, and there are corpuscles that are near the base of the medullary pyramid. So we have the ones that are near the medulla are called juxtamedullary, meaning that they are neighbors of the medulla. And if we look at this renal corpuscle, it is a renal corpuscle, but the loop of Henle must dip down into the medulla, but a short segment of it is in the medulla, while this glomerulus is nearer to the medulla, and a large part of the loop of Henle is present in the medulla. It's time to write notes, and the best way to write notes is a mind map, and you can go through this mind map at your ease, and it contains the basic facts about the nephron. Then, in this situation, we are continuing the story of the collecting system. The collecting system, where does it start? It starts at the minor calyx, where the papilla opens into this minor calyx, and this is the beginning of the story. So each medullary pyramid has a minor calyx. How do we know that this is a minor calyx? Because it is attached to the tip of the pyramid of the medulla. Two or more minor calyces collect into a space called major calyx, and 2 to 3 major calyces collect into a wider space called renal pelvis. Now, the renal pelvis, sometimes it is entirely inside the kidney, sometimes part of it is outside the kidney at the renal sinus. The pelvis is going to get narrower, and the start of the ureter is present at this point. Now, here is the area of the hilum, and we can see that the ureter is coming down. Where is it? Is it in front of which muscle? It is in front of psoas major. Then, as it comes down, it crosses the common iliac vein, artery and vein, and enters the pelvis to join the urinary bladder. Time to write notes about the ureter. Now, let's highlight some important piece of information. If we go to overview, and we know that the ureter is a muscular tube 25 centimeter long and 1 centimeter wide. Is this important piece of information? The answer is yes, because if a person has a stone in the pelvis of the kidney and it is smaller than 1 centimeter in diameter, we tell this patient that the stone will be coming down. If it is larger than 1 centimeter in diameter, then this stone is not coming down. And the ureter starts from the kidney pelvis and takes an S-curved course and enters obliquely into the urinary bladder, which is going to give it a valvular action. Now, of course, the mucosa is transitional because it is waterproof, no absorption occurs through it. And let's go to the muscles of the wall of the ureter, and we can see that it is smooth muscle, but we should take care that in the ureter it is inner longitudinal and outer circular, opposite arrangement from that of the intestine. And then as we come lower down near the bladder, there is another layer added to the lower third, and which is an outer longitudinal smooth muscle. The urinary bladder. Where is the urinary bladder? It is in the pelvis. Where exactly? It is posterior to the pubis symphysis, and it receives the two openings of the two ureters, and it has an opening for the urethra to void its contents. In the female, it is anterior to the vagina and inferior to the uterus. Let's collect more information about the urinary bladder. First of all, is the shape of the urinary bladder constant? The answer is no. It depends how much it contains urine. What is the wall of the urinary bladder made of? It is made of smooth muscle. What is the arrangement of the smooth muscle? It is in a crisscross type of arrangement. That means it is not inner circular or outer longitudinal or the opposite. Now, is there another name for the smooth muscle of the urinary bladder? The answer is yes. It is called detrusor muscle. Externally, is it covered by the peritoneum? The answer is yes, it is covered by peritoneum. What is the epithelium of the urinary bladder? Of course, it must be transitional, waterproof. is the inner surface uniform? The answer is no. It has trabeculations, but it has a smooth triangular area called trigone. Trigone is bounded by the two ureteric openings and then the internal urethral opening. This is a smooth surface of the urinary bladder all the time. Here we also have a problem. Just like the passage of blood through the circulatory system, it should flow in one physiological direction. The same as for gastrointestinal tract. The food and when it is digested must flow in one physiological direction. The same is the case in case of the urinary system. Urine must pass only in one physiological direction. Now, what is interesting is that when the ureter brings urine into the urinary bladder, the bladder is going to be distended. Now, is the urine going to go up to the kidney again? The answer is no, this is not physiological, and therefore there is a kind of valve. Where do I find this valvular mechanism? It is at the point of entry of the ureters into the urinary bladder. Ureters enter obliquely, bringing urine, and this oblique course is going to provide this mechanism. When the bladder is distended, the bladder wall is going to exert pressure on the part of the ureter in the urinary bladder wall and preventing urine from going up. Of course, it is time to write notes about the urinary bladder. We have always to sit down and practice what is called a moment of reality. When you hold a piece of paper and a pen and you start writing, you write what you know, and you can see how much you know and how much you are missing and what is right and what is wrong. The best way of doing this is a mind map. Then we come to the urethra. There is a difference between a male urethra and a female urethra. The male urethra is much longer and the female urethra is around 4 centimeters long, and this shortness makes it nearer to the external environment, and bacteria can get in easier, and therefore inflammations of the urinary tract and the bladder is more common in females. You can go through this at your ease, and you can copy any branch if you want to learn. Try it and see what is the difference between writing notes and not writing notes. This is the end of this lecture, and it is the end of the lectures of this course. Because of the special circumstances, one would have wished to give more lectures but because the exam is getting nearer and nearer, and it is not fair to add more lectures to the course.